My name is Rick Tischaefer. I'm the president of the North Dakota Fur Hunters and Trappers Association. Today we're going to demonstrate using a foothold trap to catch beaver at a caster mound set. The safety minute for today is, as it usually is, if you have a partner, trap with a partner, trap with a friend, trap with another person to share those experiences, kind of look out for one another and basically help share the workload too. You always want to have like a tile spade with you so you can prod the area ahead of you where you're walking, just to make sure there's no surprises. With foothold traps, it all depends on the individual. If you have a lot of experience setting those foothold traps, you can probably do it by hand. If you need a setting tool in order to do that, make sure it's within arm's reach. Don't want to have any problems occur because you get caught in a trap and there's no way for you to get out of it. So keep your tool handy. Make sure you use it if you have to. So today, what we've done is we've scouted this waterway. We've got a beaver dam just to my side. And one of the unique habits of a beaver is to spend a lot of time not only maintaining those beaver dams, but spending time in the corners where that beaver dam meets the terrain surrounding the waterway. Those are called the corners. They just rest there. They just check them out. It's a good place for them to come up when they're curious. So what we've done is we're on one corner of that dam, and that's where we're going to make our foothold set. All right, so we're going to catch the beaver ideally by the back leg. That's how we're going to make this set work. Where we place the trap and how we place it, you can target one foot or another, front foot or back foot. So what we're going to do with this type of set is I'm going to target the right rear foot of that beaver that's going to approach the caster mound. What we're going to do is imitate where another beaver has pushed up some mud and deposited some caster, marking that spot like he's been there. The beavers that generally live here, we're going to seem somewhat offended by that and investigate that beaver by walking up on its caster mound and smelling it. Sometimes they destroy it, push it back into the water, whatever the case may be. But the idea situation is to get that beaver to investigate it, and in that process, place his foot in your foothold trap. The trap that we're going to use here today is a Bridger number 5. It's been modified so that the anchoring system is off the center of the base plate versus off of one of the springs. When you purchase these traps, the chain's going to come off of one of these springs. We move it over, modify it, move it over to the center, and we add another swivel in that chain. That's just in case the beaver doesn't use the submergence system and ends up staying put, actually being restrained by the trap. So we all know that, best management practices, having a restraining foothold device anchored in the center, swivels in the anchoring chain, is treats that animal much more humanely than having one anchored off to the corners of the springs. The other thing that we've done with this trap is we've added a posi-trip pan system to it. Basically, it's a system where you can tighten a nut and bolt and set your pan tension. Again, another one of those items that makes your trap more selective is that you can put a pan on there and you can tighten up that pan so that it takes about 6 pounds of pressure in order to fire the trap. Okay, the back leg of a beaver, 6 pounds is a good place to be with that trap tension. We have a lot of animals that walk along the shoreline through here, raccoons, maybe an otter that's passing by, mink. There's some shorebirds that loaf in here and stuff like that. So with the depth of our trap and the amount of weight it takes to fire that trap, we're going to be pretty safe. We're going to be selective, and we're only going to target beaver. So that's how that setup is with our foothold device. I've got it attached to what's called a drowning rod. So this is 1/2 inch hot rolled steel, 10 foot long. I've created a one-way device by this piece of angle so that when the beaver gets caught by the foot, his flight response is to return to the safety of the water. As it goes down, the trap will go with it, but it can't come back up. All right, so that's a one-way device for a submergence system. All right, so they'll go down the rod, and not be able to return. At the end of that rod, so our anchoring end, we've got a washer. We're going to put a piece of re-rod through that to anchor it near the shoreline. I've also attached a little bit longer piece of wire, which is going to be attached to a log further up the bank. A log or a stick or maybe another anchoring system up the bank. And what that helps you out with is flooding situations. We get a little bit of moisture, a little bit of runoff. If the area that we're in happens to rise 2 or 3 feet, you won't lose your trap and rod system to a washout. All right, so this little piece of wire, it's not intended to anchor or hold a beaver or anything like that. It's just to hold your system in place. We wire that up the bank a little bit further than where we anchor the working end of the rod. So this submergence system uses this 1/2-inch rod that's 10 feet long. You don't always have to use that. You can use cable. In this case, it's 3/32 cable, and it's 10 feet long, and it works the same way. We've built in our one-way device, which just happens to be a swivel. This rivet here would attach to the trap. This end here is your anchoring end out into deep water. Whether you can walk out there and put a stake in, or walk out there and pound a stick in, or attach it to a concrete block, fire rim, or whatever the case may be, to use that your anchoring end out into deeper water. The uphill side, again, adjustable loop. We would put our re-rod through the loop, have our trap attached. Again, flight response for that beaver is to return to water. The device will slide down, but it won't slide back. All right? It can't come back on the cable. A little bit lighter than hauling that 10-foot rod around. You do have to scout your area so you know what you're working in and what type of devices that you're going to use. We certainly wouldn't use this foothold trap in some of that shallower water that's only knee deep. When we use a submergence system, you have to remember that the depth of the water at the end of your submergence system has to accommodate not only the length of the trap chain from your anchoring or your submergence system, but also incorporate the length of the beaver. Water that's 36 or 40 inches deep will not be enough to submerge that beaver. He'll be able to stick his nose up in the air and be able to breathe. So you need to know that your area that you're working is deep enough to submerge that entire beaver, so it causes the death of that beaver. Okay, so we're going to fashion our caster mount here. We have a natural inlet. So I'm going to get some mud, just like a beaver would. Beaver gathers up some mud, pushes it up on the bank. It's like slow, we slick it up a little bit. We look at it and say, oh, somebody else has been here. Sometimes you can get away with just making a fake caster mount and not use any lure. Again, it's their eye appeal. I mean, you're creating eye appeal for that beaver to investigate. What we're going to use today is caster lure. So beaver caster comes from a gland located near their anus. So when a beaver is marking his territory, he'll push that mud up there and he'll get right up on top of that mound, and some of that secretion from his gland, he'll deposit that on the mound. So what we've done is we're going to imitate that, and casters from beaver that we've already harvested, we remove the glands and allow them to dry, grind them up, all right, and that's what creates this brown pasty stuff. So what we add to the dried caster is a little bit of glycol, acts like an antifreeze, and I add a little bit of mineral oil to it. So what the mineral oil does is it keeps it fluid, so you're able to work with it. But what it does is it when the lure gets close to the surface of the water, it creates a slick, basically an oil slick. All right, I'll demonstrate that here. So see how that oil slick is created? The mineral oil causes that. It's floating on the surface of the water. And when a beaver's swimming, his nose is only about an inch, inch and a half above the surface of the water as he's swimming through the water. And that oil slick and that scent travels on that oil slick through the water, and he's able to smell that from quite a ways downstream or downwind, and he'll travel that scent back to figure out where it came from and investigate the set, and in the process of doing so, hopefully places his foot exactly where I want it to and gets caught in the foothold trap. All right, so we've got our set lured. I've got a little caster up on the mud itself, and before I leave, I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to place it right close to the water so some of that bleeds off into the water. Okay, because I'm working right here, I don't want that to happen because all of that oil and stuff will get on my gloves and on my boots. So placing that lure so it bleeds on the water is the last thing that we do. I'm going to go ahead and place our trap. What we do with these rods is I reach out 10 feet and actually shove it into the bottom a little bit. Now when that beaver gets out at the end of it, he won't be able to pull that out of the bottom. So it's actually stuck. I got it stuck into the bottom. Bring my lock up. Get my wire out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and anchor the working end. So the working end of my rod is here. I've anchored it with a re-rod stake. I will, before I leave, attach that wire to that log. Okay, so as far as where we place our foothold trap to catch a beaver, so as a beaver swims along, most of his propulsion comes from his back legs because his back feet are webbed. His front feet look like our hands. Basically, they're not webbed. They're used for picking up stuff or pushing mud around or whatever the case may be. They're not used for propulsion. The back legs are, which makes them much more heavier and stout, which is why I want to target that catch location with that type of trap. So as a beaver swims along, back legs are pushing them. As they come into shore, as soon as the front feet and the chest hit the bottom, their legs drop, their back legs drop. So we want to figure out where that's at. So as a good rule of thumb, if you close your hand up, the distance from your closed hand to your foothold trap, all right? That distance there is for a general sized beaver, works out real well. So I know when that beaver comes swimming in, he's going to breast. That's called breasting when they hit like that. He's going to breast right about here. So with that distance back, I want my foothold trap here. All right, right in this general area. Beavers' feet aren't directly underneath their body. They have what's called a straddle. Basically, that's the width of the body. So our trap, depending on what foot that we want to target, has to be offset for that. All right, I wouldn't put it directly in the line of travel because he'll miss it when his back legs go down. So I'm going to be a little bit to this side because I want a right rear catch. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bed that trap in. I prefer the dog and trigger system to the outside. So I'm going to place it like this versus like that. All right, so it'll be just like so. My target spot was right here. I'm going to be a little bit off to the side. Firm that trap so it doesn't move. You don't have to cover it with mud or anything like that because the beaver can't see that. All right, so there's no problem that way, just as long as the trap is probably the same color as the bottom that you're working in. You wouldn't want a new piece of steel down there, a big shiny gray thing down there kind of stuff. So you want to kind of blend in with the bottom, but you just nestle it in so it's firm and it doesn't move, doesn't rock. And it's a similar color to the bottom. It's not so noticeable. So as that beaver swims in to check out my lure, he's going to breast here. His back feet are going to drop here, and I'm off to the right, so I should be able to predict that that right rear foot is going to, he's going to place it right on the trap pan, cause that trap to fire and be caught. His flight response is to return back to the water. The system is set up to allow him to do that, except when he gets below the surface of the water, it won't allow him to return. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and place that little bit of stick with the caster lure on it next to the water. I'm going to get out of the water. I'm going to go ahead and wire off the upper end of my rod, my submergence rod. Other than that, that's about it for this set. Thanks for joining. Good luck on your trap line.